Welcome back to the Football Fitness Federation podcast. This is episode 267. I'm joined on the podcast today by Lucas Posthuma. Lucas, how are we doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Very, very good. I'm excited for this one. The what, sorry?
Yeah, the pronunciation was good.
Yeah? Are you giving me credit for that? Okay. Okay, I'll take that. The pressure's on when I start the podcast with names like yours, so I need to get it right. How's things with you, Lucas? Everything good?
Yeah, everything good. Going well. Club. Yeah, we're doing well in terms of points and how we're standing on the table, and the team is growing. So happy at the club, and the club is happy, I think.
Perfect. Now we're going to get into that in a little bit in terms of your role right now and who you're working with, which I haven't mentioned just yet. But will you take us back, give us a little bit of a bio on yourself, a bit of a career breakdown on where you've been and what's led to this role?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, as I said to you before the podcast, I'm only 24 years old, so I'm quite young in the field. So I had a bachelor degree in human movement sciences at the university here in Amsterdam. I work at Almere, but Amsterdam is close to Almere. So after that, I went to do my master's, also human movement sciences at the same university in Amsterdam. And then I did specialization in sport and sport psychology. And as part of my master's, I did a 13 months internship at Ajax at the first team at the sports science department. And after that, I wanted to start working at supermarket again, but then I got the opportunity to work part-time at this club at Almere City next to my master's. So I was doing that part-time, and then the other half of the week I was studying. And then I finished my master's, and then after one season part-time at the club, I started full-time. That was already not this season, but the season before, so two seasons ago. So this is my third season at the club, and fourth season in the professional football.
Which is pretty incredible when you think you're 23. So you're 23 with a master's, with 4 years in the professional game.
24.
Okay, 24. But even still, that's quite a lot of experience for someone your age, isn't it? And we'll dive into this in a little bit because I think it's important to discuss. We have had people on the podcast before that have been a similar age to yourself in similar roles, and I think there's a lot of lessons for a lot of people to take from it. But I said to you before we started recording, what I couldn't skip past is your time at Ajax, because obviously such a massive club. I know they've had the struggles this year, but I wanted to just go into some of the lessons that you took from being around that club. In terms of the cultures to start with, what were some of the big things you took away?
Yeah, the most what helped me was like the hierarchy or the
hierarchy.
So the head coach, and then I had for example the head of sports science, and I had my role as intern at the first team. And for me, it was good to start with this because the steps to ask, for example, okay, how should I do this, or how do you want this, are less big. For example, if you go to the head of sports science, compared to if you had to go to a head coach or maybe a performance coach or someone else. So the niche was quite small in which I worked, and it helped me to like develop myself. Okay, how do I get a message across to, for example, to a trainer? I could practice that to the head of sports science, for example. And then they gave me the tips, and then I was like, okay, I can do this next time. Maybe I to the performance coach myself, or I get it again to them and then ask feedback again so I could learn. And the other part is that, for example, as me as a practitioner with a young age, I wasn't allowed, in brackets, to go to the, for example, the assistant coach to tell him something or to make jokes about, for example, an assistant trainer. Whereas at the small club here, we constantly joke about each other because it's a small club and like it's a warmer club, you can say that, but there's less like levels above each other, whereas at Ajax it's above each other, and at Almere City it's more next to each other because it's a small club. So that's what I learned, but it was good as a young practitioner to have like a smaller niche which I could learn and develop myself before I would jump into the deep water to, for example, go to a head coach. So that's one lesson that I took from that. And I also had, for example, feedback when I made a joke, which I didn't even do on purpose, but I made a joke, for example, okay, you are is it that cold? Why don't you wear a winter jacket? Or, for example, I said it to the assistant coach, and then I got the feedback from the head of sports science. I wouldn't do that. So whereas if I do this at Almere City, it's no problem. But it's good that you learn this as a young practitioner, because in my opinion, it's better to open up, whereas you have to close down. So I could open up at Almere City, so to say, whereas if I were at Ajax, I was a bit closed only with my sports science department and not opening up to the other departments or the trainers or the assistant coaches.
Yeah, so you're learning how to interact with people in different roles and people in, I suppose, the decision makers, aren't you, in terms of head coaches, and if you ever came across any directors or anyone in that's going to be higher up. Yeah, no, that's interesting. In terms of, because this is obviously your first experience, or sorry, the experience at Ajax was your first experience within the professional game.
Yeah.
So working with footballers, was there anything that sort of stuck out to you as maybe a surprise in terms of the way they prepare for games, or anything that really you took forward into your role now?
I must admit that I was surprised on how normal they are.
Yeah.
So I would expect them when I came in. I was a big fan of Ajax. I still am, but I came in and I was like, okay, they must be like superstars.
Yeah.
And they want me with the they already warned me that they are just normal people. Not warning, but they said to me, okay, they're just normal people, so act normal against them. And they really were normal people. And of course, there are always players that are maybe feeling a bit more than you are, but the most of them are just normal players, and they just wanted to have a small talk with you, and they want to make you feel at home, or at least be comfortable around them. So that was what surprised me a bit, I must admit, but it was also very nice because it helped me just blending in the club.
Brilliant.
So, yeah.
And in terms of Ajax as a club over the years, they've had an unbelievable amount of players coming through the academy, getting into first team and moving on for X amount of pounds or euros, like for a number of years, haven't they? It's been a real tradition getting players through. So is there anything that you saw in terms of the work that they were doing where you were like, this is seamless? You can see why the transition works so well at a club like that?
So I can give you a bit of an example, but we worked in, for example, there were 3 interns, one with the under 18s, one with the under 23s or young Ajax, and one with the first team, which was me. And we were sitting next to each other, and we were always chatting, okay, how is your training doing and how is your training? And what my impression was that the under 23s were always training like really hard, so that the only capability which would hinder them to go to the first team would be the technical or tactical capabilities, whereas the physical capabilities were always top. So they would train harder than the first team, and they would do more work than the first team. So I think that's a big plus for the seamless going from under 18 to under 23 or to the first team. So I think that's one factor. And as I said, we had only our science department, so I haven't seen much of, for example, the strength training back then or the periodization in terms of, okay, how do they train? So this is only my experience, which I could see when I was behind the computer watching the training or next to the pitch.
Brilliant. I'm really interested now to hear how the lessons at a club like that have been applied into your current role with your club. Can you give, just to start with, before we jump into that, can you give a little bit of background around the club? And also just recently in terms of what has happened with the league that they're in and all the rest of it?
Yeah. So the club is founded in 2005, so it's only 18 years now. So it's young puber, we say. Our CEO always says that. And Yeah, so what's good, what I like of it is that I was born in Almere, so I've seen the club grow when I was, for example, 12 or 13. Every Friday night, me and some friends of me were going to the stadium just to watch the football because we didn't have anything else to do on a Friday night. And yeah, what happened last season was that we promoted for the first time ever to the Eredivisie. So it's the first time that we're in the highest division of the Netherlands, and we had a couple of failed attempts before. So we had one time we reached the playoff final, and then we lost the final. That was in 2017, I think. So it's 6 years later, and now we are finally in the first division, whereas we're only 18 years old. So it's quite quick that we are in the highest division. And yeah, so what was fun was that last season we, on the last playoff final match day, we won away at FC Emmen, and then we promoted. So a big party started at the city, which I couldn't imagine. I would expect that only maybe 2,000 or 3,000 people were just celebrating, but there were like 6,000 or 7,000 people, and the stadium was sold out for this season already in like 10 minutes. So it was a big hype around the club, and yeah, also a lot of positivity because of course it's the first time and we don't have anything to lose, you can say. But of course we have ambition and we want to stay in, and I think this really helped the club to continue to grow. They already started in the past years, but yeah, of course playing in the highest division helps in terms of exposure, but also in terms of engagement of the player, of the fans and everyone around the club. So yeah, that was really nice. I shaved my head when we promoted, so my girlfriend didn't like that, but there was we had a small bet with our captain, so I was bald, and now my hair is finally back on. So that was nice.
That's
Now,
commitment. That's true commitment, that, Lucas.
yeah, so they said, yeah, you should shave your head when we promote. I said, okay, why not?
Brilliant.
It was stupid, but I would do it again if we would promote again. Hopefully we don't relegate, but if it's necessary, I will do it again.
Brilliant. So when you went into the club then, which is now 4 seasons ago.
No, 3. So
3 seasons ago.
Yeah.
What was the makeup of the performance department? Like, who was actually involved at that time? Obviously, not necessarily names, but like, what sort of practitioners were involved?
Yeah. So Niels Turner, I still mention his name, but he brought me in. He was the performance manager. At that time, he's now at another club in the Netherlands. And we had Bas Bijmer, who's the current performance manager, and he was then the performance coach. So we had a performance manager and a performance coach, and they brought me in as a sports scientist because they wanted someone to handle the data and to assist them in visualizations and all those kind of things.
Yeah.
Just to have more time on hands in the gym or on the pitch or you name it. So it was we were 3, and then we had one not even a full-time performance coach for the academy. So that was the situation back then. So only 3 guys on the performance side, and then we had 2 physiotherapists which were already working there. And so we were with 5 on the medical performance staff.
And how was that transition to now?
It's actually funny because Niels left the season after I came in, and we we were stuck with 2 of us, so Bas and me. So we are now with even less people than we were with when I started.
Okay.
Yeah, so my role changed a bit. So I became more of a hybrid practitioner, so also more generalist, which did not only the data side, but also more on the pitch or the periodization or the strength and conditioning work. So we the workload increased a bit, but we managed because we are promoted, and now we are just looking for interns or people who want to help us just because they like the club, but we are looking for that for after the winter break.
And how do you feel like that's developed you as a practitioner? Because obviously working at a club like Ajax, and bigger clubs, there's going to be more, I suppose, specialists in areas.
Yeah.
And then going to a club like you're at now, in terms of Almere, that you're going to, like you've just mentioned, you have to become more of a generalist, don't you, and cover and wear more hats. So how do you feel like that's progressed? You feel like you've come on a lot from being in that role?
Yeah, I thought about this before we had this conversation, but I think the big difference is that when I came in as a specialist, so to say, for the data visualization or the data handling and as being a sports scientist, then from there on, I became more a generalist because I was also responsible, for example, for nutrition or helping players with their food. And then I was also doing things on the pitch. So I was forced to learn quicker. So I think the big difference is that at Ajax, of course, I was an intern, so my responsibilities were very low. But here at Almere, my responsibilities, were a bit bigger or even much bigger than they were at Ajax. So I was forced to learn quicker. So, for example, when I was thinking, okay, how could I implement strength training for a certain player with a certain question? Okay, then I had to look things up for myself, and then I need to make like scientifically backed or at least the best option for that player in helping him to reach his goals. So I was forced to learn quicker, but also to make decisions, and that's the big difference. Because of course, in the beginning, I was doubting, okay, am I doing the right thing, or should I look things up more, or should I have more evidence for a certain way of doing things? But in the end, you just have to make the decision which you feel is right based on your experience, but also based on maybe scientific literature. So I learned to do that, and I think that really helped me in just becoming more responsible, but also in learning quicker. Because as I said, you have to if you are responsible for it.
I think the listeners will find this really beneficial, but how did you find it in terms of being in that role where you've got lots of responsibilities and realizing that there's maybe an area that you need to develop yourself as a practitioner, and then finding probably the time to go away, whether that's reading, whether that's speaking to people, however you approach that development, finding the time then to spend on it to bring that up in terms of one of the attributes as a practitioner. How did that work for you, or did you find it quite easy?
No, in the beginning I was really insecure because I just came off the university, and there, of course, you learn, okay, you have to scientifically prove things before you can implement things. That's kind of how they learn you things. But of course, football is always ahead of research. So sometimes there's no research. So this made me insecure, and I think it helped me to discuss, for example, with Bas, so the performance coach, on how he would do things, or even with the physiotherapist, and still with Niels, which already left the club. And as I said to you before, I took a mentor in hand, so James Malone, which which really helped me in having more specific goals. So which area I want to improve first, and most of the time that are the areas which I was not the best at. So that's how I chose which topics or which attributes I want to develop first. So in my case, the first thing I did was working on a periodization, because Niels, who left, most of the time did that, and Bas took that over, but I had to do that for the under 23s. So I need to make sure that I know enough to schedule a good program. So, and after that, or right now, I'm doing a strength course. So step by step, I'm starting to develop my attributes or my hard skills, so to say.
Yeah, brilliant. I think that circle of coaches that you can reach out to at a time like that is really important, isn't it? And how have you found that in terms of the role of a mentor? Because obviously James has been on the podcast before. I know there's a lot of people that have worked with him in clubs and also out of clubs as well. Do you find that it's really beneficial that he's not at the club you're at and he's looking from a bit of a neutral perspective?
Yeah. Of course, sometimes, for example, I have a different opinion than, for example, Bas, and then we can discuss about it, but we sometimes agree to disagree. And then someone who's outside of it, with like a neutral eye on it. They can give me tips, and sometimes I must admit that I was wrong or I could adapt something. And yeah, for me, I think it's good to not have someone which is in your close circle of, for example, colleagues or co-workers to discuss things with. And yeah, that's why I took someone who was not even from the Netherlands, but from England. And yeah, I think that really helps, because it also helped me getting in touch with other practitioners, whereas I only knew the practitioners in the Netherlands before, whereas now I know other practitioners from foreign countries as well. So yeah, that's really helping me. And I discussed, for example, with someone who was in Turkey, or someone who was in Saudi Arabia. So that really helped me, because always the culture is always different. So for example, I have French players at the club, and the culture in France is completely different than in the Netherlands. And sometimes we think, okay, why don't you work? Whereas they must think, the players must think, okay, why are you always trying to push us, for example? So sometimes helps to speak to practitioners of other countries, which you may have not spoken before or spoke to before.
I think that's a great point. A really, really good point, because it's amazing how much you actually learn when you start those conversations, isn't it? And essentially everyone, or a lot of people out there, they want to learn from people working in different environments and with different groups of players in different countries. So by reaching out, the worst that can happen is they say no or ignore you. The best that can happen is you suddenly develop a international network of coaches that you've suddenly got people to reach out to, isn't it? So there's real benefit to it.
Yeah, for sure. So I must admit, some of the people I didn't know by name, and I would never get to know, but with the mentorship program, I was kind of forced to learn them, get to know them. I mean, because they were in the same mentorship group, or they were doing the same program as I was doing. So yeah, it's really beneficial to have people outside of your country, because otherwise your circle stays small, and sometimes the practice, just the S&C practice in the Netherlands, is completely different than, for example, in Spain or in France or in the Middle East. So I think it's really beneficial as a practitioner to have different opinions about different topics, but also different ways of working and how they are working at different clubs. That could really help you. So yeah, I'm quite happy that I did that, and I know that other practitioners do that as well. So I think it's a good thing to start with if you don't do that right now.
Definitely, yeah, 100%. When you were preparing, so once you'd won promotion, Lucas, what was your thought pathway in terms of preparing for this season? Like, what were some of the differences that you saw from the previous league last year to going into the top league this year?
Yeah, the first thing that was regarding the time. So our club promoted at the 10th of June, and then I think 6 weeks later the competition started.
Wow.
So no, maybe 8 weeks. Let's say 8 weeks.
Still not long.
No, so we had a pretty long season, because of course we played the playoffs, which was like 3 weeks on top of the regular season, and the regular season was already quite long because of the World Cup.
Mm-hmm.
So I think almost a year we had competition or matches. So what we did was we gave the players quite a long time off. So we started only at the 10th of July. So 1 month they had off, and 2 weeks they did nothing, and 2 weeks they had an off-season program. But the preseason was very short. So that was the first thing that we were tackling. So okay, how can we manage it that we make sure that the players are fit at the beginning of the season, but not we are not overreaching them. So that was the first problem. And what we did was we looked at the previous season and thought, okay, where did we go maybe a bit too slow, or was the pace just good enough? And then we would tell the coach, okay, coach, we only have 6 weeks before the competition starts, but we may need 8 weeks to get them in optimal conditions. So they know it already, but that wasn't the case. So we could manage it quite well in the 5 to 6 weeks preseason. no, 4 to 5 weeks. In the sixth week, we had the first competition match. So that was the first big difference, because the previous season we had like 10 weeks before the competition started. So that was the first big difference. And obviously what was the biggest difference was that in terms of resources, every company almost reached out to us. So we even got letters personally addressed to us from companies which we didn't know, on, okay, we can help you and we can help you stay in the league, and the next step is this, for example. So that was the next big thing, was okay, we already wanted to get some things in. So for example, an athlete monitoring system. We already wanted a new one because the contract expired with the previous one, but we got, for example, 6 offers, and then we had to choose, okay, which one do we want? And the same with, for example, we are now doing tests with default, which we didn't have before because we didn't have the resources to pay for such a system. And all those kind of systems, we had to think of, okay, what do we need? So we wanted, for example, some improvements in nutrition. We wanted something to improve in the gym, but we also wanted to improve something in the testing and measurement of players and injury prevention. So with, for example, default. So we had to make decisions, and that was the biggest thing, because Bas and I were constantly discussing, okay, what do we need? What's the most beneficial with the current budget we have? So I think that's also a big difference. And for example, a lot of people reached out to us to ask if we had a job for them, or that they wanted to help us with their services. So yeah, sometimes it was, for me, because I'm quite young, and I can imagine that, for example, saying no to a young person or young practitioner could be harsh, but we had to, because we had too many people asking things and willing to do things for us, but also wanting things from us. So yeah, that was the biggest difference, I think.
And when it came down to them prioritizing what you went with, and again, you don't have to talk about that if you don't want, but I'm more interested around those decisions between you and Baz, in terms of this needs to be the priority because we're stepping into this league and we've got these extra challenges throughout a long season. Where did your mindset go around that?
Yeah, so the first decision we made, which we already made before we promoted, because we wanted that before, was about the athlete monitoring system. So we had discussions going about if we should hire a system or a company to help us, because I could do it, but it would cost me a lot of time.
Yeah.
About the time. So for example, in the end, we chose a system which did the data processing and the medical availability. All those kind of things are now in that system. Whereas I could have built, for example, the readiness questionnaire, and we could have done that internally, but we spent money on it because then I had time on hands, because we had more players and more responsibilities, and we didn't get an extra colleague to help us. So we had to make the decision. We are only with 2 persons, so we choose to take the athlete monitoring system. So I have more time in hands to do other things and to assist Bas in, for example, gym sessions or pitch-based sessions. And we had an extra team because the under 23 became our responsibility, because they also promoted to the football pyramid.
Okay.
So that was the first decision we made, and we had some discussions about it, but in the end, we just chose to take a system and use that.
And was that mindset of yours around availability across the season then for players? Was that like a priority for you?
Yeah. So I think not for me, but Bas, of course, as head of performance, it's always about availability and how the players are in terms of injuries and in terms of conditioning. And for the physiotherapy, we got a new practice. So we worked with the practice the previous 3 seasons, and then the contract expired with that practice, and we got a new practice. So that's also one reason why we did that, because this is easier to start with. So we didn't have to build, for example, medical availability questionnaires or all those kind of spreadsheets about availability percentages. So it was only in one system. So that was also a main reason why we did that, because that would be easier for the transition to the new practice. So we could just put it in a system, and the system would handle the data and give us the reports we wanted. Whereas if we would build it ourselves, that would take a lot of times, whereas the time was spent on just getting to know the physiotherapist and getting to know the new practice, and also the physiotherapist getting to know the players, because they were used to previous physiotherapists and now they were gone. So we had to build new connections or new relationships with them. So I think that's also one reason why we chose the athlete monitoring system.
I think that's a great insight into how technology can be used so well within the game, isn't it? Because you spoke there a lot about utilizing the time, and obviously you could spend a lot of time working on things like that, but you've essentially saved it. And what you've referenced there as well is you've saved it to go and work on, I suppose, the human skills in terms of the connection between a new member of staff, between the players and that new member of staff. And that's the really important stuff, isn't it? So no, I think that was a really fascinating insight into it, and something that completely makes sense in that position as well.
Yeah. So it was made not tough, but we had to get used to each other, of course, because we had a way of working with the previous physiotherapists, and now we had new ones. So we need to get to know each other. But when we are in training camp and there's a beer in the evening when the players are in their bed, it's always making it a lot easier. So that was quite quick that we managed it.
And was there anything else in terms of going into this new league that stood out for you that you knew you had to prepare the players for? Obviously, we're talking a different standard of football because it's a different league. But was there anything else that you, as practitioners, you sat down and discussed where you were like, this is going to be different this year?
So not on the beginning of the season, but now we are progressing in the season. I must admit that one thing that we didn't think of was that there are many external factors regarding the players. So, for example, their physiotherapists offering their hands to the players. Okay, if you're injured, just come to us. So there are a lot of companies and persons pulling the players or pulling on the players to get them, for example, to do a rehab in their practice, or just to, for example, do an extra training when they have a day off. So that was in the beginning. So that's increasing because, of course, we are playing at the higher level. So the players get more exposure at the highest level, and of course there are people thinking, okay, I can get money from out of this, or I can get publicity out of this. So that's, I think, a big difference with the second division and the first division, is that now players, for example, can have their own performance coach or can have their own physiotherapist, whereas that wasn't the case in the second league, or at least it was less the case. Of course, you always have players with their own physiotherapist, but I think it has, it increased.
I'm interested with that because we've spoke about that a lot on the podcast, and we've had a lot of coaches talking about how they are trying to make it work, both for the club, both for the practitioners at the club, and also the players. So how have you found that then in terms of the work? And I'm probably leaning more towards like any S&C work that they're going to be doing, because obviously physiotherapy can be a little bit different, maybe a different conversation. But for you as a practitioner, how have you found it?
I think the main thing that is really helping us is open communication.
Yeah.
So of course, players in the beginning, they always want to hide that they are doing S&C work at another practice or with another person, because maybe they are ashamed, or maybe they think we are disappointed when they tell us. But I think open communication is really important, because sometimes, and actually always, we have a good thought out schedule for the players. So for example, they train on Monday, Tuesday, they have a day off, and then they train on Thursday, Friday, and for example, Saturday there's the match. Whereas if a player thinks, okay, I have a day off, and he starts to work quite heavily with the personal trainer or with another S&C coach, that could interfere with each other. So whereas you want to have a positive effect of the training on Tuesday and then rest on Wednesday, because then super compensation can happen. For example, if they start training on Wednesday, I mean, quite heavily, then the super compensation doesn't take place and there's even more overreaching or even overtraining. So I think that's really important, to have an open communication with the players. And sometimes what we did was that we, for example, give them a GPS tracker. And that could be just for us, that we know, okay, what do they do at the other training that we don't see or we don't give. But also we could also use that to give the players feedback. Okay, so we are doing this in a week, and if you also do this with your personal trainer, this could happen, because, for example, you ran too much or you ran not enough, because you can think, okay, Monday, Tuesday, I don't do it because I train on Wednesday, whereas we think, why don't you do it on Monday, Tuesday? So the conversation gets easier with the objective data, I would say. And we try to have an open communication with as many players as possible. And we always try to tell players what our plan is with them and what our goal is for them. But they can then also say to us, okay, but I want this, and I want to develop another capability. Whereas, for example, we want them to have more, to be more agile. They could say, okay, I want to have a higher top speed, which would have an effect on the program, but it's better that we know it than that they start doing it, for example, on the day off, because then we have a bigger problem. They could get injured or they could get overreached. So I think the key point is open communication.
And that communication, you've obviously had it with the players, but have you had it with the practitioners as well?
Not yet, because the most of the players are going to like a skills trainer and not really to a performance trainer. The players we know, so the players we know it from, they go to a more technical coach, or not really as S&C coach.
Yeah.
Of course, in the off season, so for example, when there's off season or an interland break, then they go to a performance coach or performance trainer, which is in their own country. Then we would give them, for example, the GPS tracker, and then that's no problem. And sometimes they tell us what they did, but we have the objective data, so it's no problem if we don't know it. Know it from training, because we know it from the data.
No, that makes complete sense. I want to move back on to you now, Lucas, because something that I had to touch on in this episode was obviously 24 years old, being in the first team.
Yeah.
Majority of the players are probably, I would say, either a similar sort of age, if not older. So how have you found that? How have you found working with players that are that sort of age, and also creating that buy-in and that relationship with those players?
Yeah, I think in the beginning it was difficult for me, because, of course, when they are my age, they could be my friends. As I said, football players are really normal players or normal persons, and we could have, for example, if they weren't a pro athlete, we could go to a bar and just have a good chat, have a good conversation, and we could be friends. But there's a difference, of course, because I'm in the staff and they are a player. So our head coach is really was in the beginning really telling us, okay, try to keep it separate. So you're the staff, they're the players. And that, I think that he mentioned that a couple of times, really helped me thinking about, okay, he's right. If I need to tell them, okay, you have to do, for example, 3 times 50 meter, and we are friends, they would say, yeah, but okay, come on, we're friends, so why do I need to do it? Whereas if we really have like the player and the staff side, it's easier for me to do certain things. So, or to tell players, okay, you have to do this or you have to do this. That's the first thing that really helped me, because of course he's older, the head coach, and he has way more experience than I have. But what also helped me, I think, as I said before, is communicating with them. So when, for example, I have a plan for a certain player, then I'm discussing that plan with the player, and then they can give their input. So we create like buy-in from both of us. So on my side there's a buy-in, but also on his side there's a buy-in. And if we, for example, would go another direction with that schedule, then we both have to admit that that's the right direction. Whereas if I'm telling him, okay, we don't go that direction, then there's I think it's easier for him then to follow me than when I were his friend, or I were his same age, so his pal, so to say.
And in terms of any coaches out there of your age or even a little bit younger, what would you say in terms of some top advice, just to finish off, like things that you've learned so far, really, to get that buy-in with players?
Yeah, I've written down a couple of points beforehand, but I think the main thing is just show capability. Just show that you know what we are talking about. So when we're talking about, for example, periodization or doing runs or conditioning, just make sure that what you tell to the players is right, or at least is showing capability. So you know what we're talking about. And for example, if a player comes in to your office and asks about, for example, I can say recovery and then taking ice baths. So know what you're talking about before you answer him. And you, of course, you don't always know everything. But as I said, at this club, you're more generalist. So I think I know enough of every topic to give a first advice. And sometimes I say, okay, I will look this up, because sometimes we come with something and I don't know it directly. And I would tell him, okay, I will look this up. I will come back to you. And then he's like, okay. And then he knows, okay, I'm thinking about it. And I think that really shows capability. And that's one thing that I think is really helping me. So if they know that I'm knowing what I talk about, then they will follow me, I think. And that's the main thing, I think. Just as they say at Ajax, old enough is good enough is old enough. So I think that's not only with the players, but also with the coaches. If you are good enough, you're old enough. And how do you become good? By learning things, and also, of course, by doing things and then failing, and then do it again the next time and do it right. So that's, I think, the main thing. And as I said, at this club, with lots of responsibility, by doing things you will learn things. So I think that's the main thing. And what may be underestimated is also presence. So if you show good presence in terms of your hair, which was hard for me in the beginning of the season when I was bald, but for example, having everything, so you shave when you have, normally you don't have a beard. I don't have a beard, so I need to be shaved, because otherwise they're all hairs over my face, and they would think, okay, what's this guy doing? He just came out of his bed and he's just not awake now. So good presence, I think, is also important, and not only in terms of how you look, but maybe also in terms of how you how your lifestyle is. So for example, when I did pre-season runs with the under-23s, I was joining them, and they were like, oh, how do you become so fit, for example? So I think that's also helping you in creating player buy-in, because when they have to do things which even I'm capable of, whereas I'm not a professional football player, I'm just a football player at the lowest division in the Netherlands, then they must think, okay, then we should do that as well, or we are even capable of doing that. So I think that's also important. And the same holds for the gym work. If you are if you have never been in the gym, and then you need players to, and then you are going to tell players, okay, you need to do this, they would look at you, and I think they would think, yeah, what's this idiot doing here, and what's he telling me? So I think it helps to be at least a bit fit, and so the presence needs to be good, I think.
Yeah, I think a lot of that just comes from leading by example, doesn't it, as well?
Yeah,
I think there's some really important points there. Lucas, that was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you for coming on the podcast. And I know you're going into a training session shortly.
Yeah.
So I will save you some time so you can have a little bit of a chill out before you go into the session. But just before you do, firstly, thank you for coming on. And also, will you just leave us with, if people have got questions or if they want to reach out to you, where would you direct them?
Yeah, to my LinkedIn page, I think. Or just search for my name, Lucas Posthuma, and then you will find me and we can connect.
Brilliant. Lucas, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.